guys, it's Joel with Taproot Therapy Collective, and I wanted to do a follow-up to my review of Irvin Yalom's book, Existential Therapy. A lot of people have had questions about different parts of that or how you use it. I also wanted to do it because I've been rereading the book. It's an enormous book. I don't have it on me, but it's like a huge honking, 400 pages or something. And there's a lot of books that I kind of read, and I'm like, man, I wish you'd just given like a TED Talk or written an article because this didn't need to be a book. Irvin Yalom's book is incredibly dense. He really deserves all of the space that he fills up on those 400 odd pages. And one of the things that I think a lot of people have a problem with Yalom is that they don't really know how to use him. Yalom's a genius. He starts group therapy he defines group therapy as a medium of treatment. He writes basically the textbook, The Theory and Practice of Group Psychotherapy, which is still the really main textbook that is used to teach that and conceptualize it. He also writes the enormous bestseller Existential Therapy that I do the review of, and that still is just a foundational book. There's so much in it that I think people have a hard time kind of taking a technique or even a perspective away from him. Here's one of the ways that I think is helpful to conceptualize kind of what Yalom's doing throughout his book. He doesn't give you a lot of technique. He doesn't give you a lot of tricks to be an existential therapist. I mean, I'm trying to think of anywhere where he even does it all. I remember in the death chapter, there's one of the things where he says that he has a technique where he has all of the patients write down every single thing about themselves that is important to them about their life and their personality and about themselves on these note cards, and then slowly one at a time put each note card down and say and feel that thing leaving and feel themselves giving it away. And then by doing all of that, you come to terms with dying and death because you're feeling all of these things that are important about you leave you, and you're getting outside of it in this way that's kind of spiritual and profound. I think that is the only technique he even mentions in 400 and something pages. A lot of it is about psychological tensions, about how other psychotherapists dealt with that in the history of therapy, where there's similarities between Jung and Horney, and where there aren't, where there's distinctions in what they're doing, his opinion of those people. And it's kind of hard to come away with it and say, okay, what do I do in therapy? So here's my take on it. In existential psychotherapy and in the theory and practice of group psychotherapy, one of the things that Yalom's doing is being very relational. He's saying that, all of these overwhelming tensions that drive anxiety and drive neuroses are coming from these existential forces. The fact that we have this knowledge that we die, the fact that we have this overwhelming fear of freedom and of actually choosing a direction in our life, even though we say we want freedom, we really don't. That we have this, we're meaning-making creatures, but we're looking at a world that's breaking our ability to make meaning, and that's causing anxiety. And then in order to heal somebody, you have to get them outside of their own head enough to give them a perspective on themselves and what they are. And in doing that, they kind of come into a spiritual or a existential, I guess Yalom would call it, place outside of themselves where they're aware of themselves as a piece of something bigger and not just as an immediate thing having an experience. They also understand how their behavior affects other people. They understand how their reactions are perceived instead of how they're perceiving their reactions. And in group therapy, you're doing that by having all these people in a group, and one person says, hey, I see you this way, and they say, I don't see myself that way, and somebody else says, well, you said all these things, so we see you that way, and then they fight, and then they get angry, and then that happens multiple times over the course of a year, and slowly they start to see that every time they're doing this, they're the only one that's holding on to this perception, or there's this relational interaction that takes place where people, through relationship, are able to get outside of their head and then come to terms with these forces by getting outside of their own experience. Yalom has one of the, I guess maybe this is a technique, but he mentions in group psychotherapy that he one time had all of these CEOs that had no idea how their behavior was affecting other people, and so he videoed an entire session, and then he showed them the videotape the next session. And one of the people, or multiple people, couldn't believe that they were forceful and judgmental, or that they were angry, like they had never really seen themselves from the outside. Existential psychotherapy, unlike the group psychotherapy book, is Yalom talking about how you do that in a room. how you bring somebody outside of themselves. And he's not saying you should do this or these are the steps, this is the framework. He's just giving examples of how that happens, where it works, where it doesn't work, where people are affected by these forces, just so the therapist can notice them. And in that way, I think he's very much leaving the style up to you. And if you read Yalom's existential works, they're very bleak and kind of dark. But then when you read his novels, or nonfiction-ish novels about being a therapist, and he's writing about being in therapy, like The Gift of Psychotherapy or Love's Execution or some of the newer things, he's a very warm, kind person who's not at all as pessimistic as he sounds in these other things. So I think his style, even though he's aware of these forces, is very kind of warm and compassionate and relationship based. And that's something that when you're reading a book that's as clinical and kind of austere as existential psychotherapy, we lose. The heart of this is about having a relationship and about bringing someone outside of themselves with that relationship, and ultimately outside of the relationship to look at their life. So that's my take on it. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, and I hope that's helpful. Got a lot of questions about that first review, so I was going to do a follow-up.